Lena was 16 years old when her whole world fell apart. It happened slowly at first, then all at once. Her father lost his job at the factory where he had worked for almost 20 years. The company shut down without warning, and just like that, her family went from comfortable to struggling. For 3 months, her parents tried to make it work. They cut back on everything. No more eating out. No more new clothes. Her mother started working double shifts at the hospital. But it was not enough. The bills kept piling up, and soon they got the notice that they had to leave their home. That was how Lena ended up moving across the country in the middle of her junior year of high school. Her aunt had a small guest house in the back of her property, and she offered to let them stay there until they got back on their feet. It was the only option they had. Lena remembered the day they drove away from her childhood home. She sat in the back seat of their old car, watching everything she knew disappear through the window. Her school, her friends, the music room where she had spent countless hours, all of it getting smaller and smaller until it was gone. She did not cry. She had already cried so much that she felt empty inside. The new town was nothing like the place she came from. It was smaller, quieter, and everyone seemed to know everyone else. When Lena walked into Lincoln High School on her first day, she felt like an alien who had landed on a strange planet. People stared at her in the hallways. They whispered to each other. She kept her head down and tried to be invisible. The guidance counselor was a tired-looking woman who seemed like she had too much work and not enough time. She handed Lena her class schedule without even looking up from her computer. "Most of the electives are full," the counselor said. "But there is one spot open in advanced choir. That will have to do. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Most of the electives are full. That will have to do." Lena felt her heart skip. Choir. She had not sung in months, not since everything fell apart. Back at her old school, she had been the lead singer in their award-winning choir. She had performed solos at competitions. She had made audiences cry with her voice. But that felt like a different life now. A different girl. "Is there anything else?" Lena asked quietly. "Maybe art or study hall?" The counselor finally looked at her. "This is what is available. You will have to make it work." So Lena walked into the choir room that afternoon with a knot in her stomach. The room was bigger than she expected, with risers set up in rows and a grand piano in the corner. About 30 students were already there, chatting and laughing like they had known each other forever. And then there was the teacher. Mrs. Whitmore stood at the front of the room like a queen surveying her kingdom. She was a tall woman in her 50s, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her posture was perfect. Her clothes were expensive. And her eyes were sharp, like they could see right through you. Lena had heard about Mrs. Whitmore from other students. She had led this choir to state championships 6 years in a row. She was considered one of the best choir directors in the region, but she was also known for something else. She was harsh, she was demanding, and she had no patience for students who did not meet her standards. When Lena walked in, Mrs. Whitmore looked at her the way someone might look at a stain on an expensive carpet. "You must be the new student," she said. Her voice was cold. "Find a seat in the back. Try to keep up." Lena nodded and made her way to the last row of risers. A few students glanced at her with curiosity, but most ignored her completely. She sat down and stared at her hands, wishing she could disappear. The rehearsal began, and Lena watched as Mrs. Whitmore commanded the room. Every note had to be perfect. Every breath had to be in the right place. When a student made a mistake, Mrs. Whitmore would stop the entire choir and call them out by name. Her criticism was sharp and public. "This is not a place for people who are not serious," Mrs. Whitmore announced at one point, her eyes sweeping across the room. "If you cannot commit 100%, you do not belong here." Lena felt those words hit her like a punch. She did not belong here. She knew that. She did not belong anywhere anymore. When it came time for warm-up exercises, Mrs. Whitmore had everyone sing scales. She walked through the rows, listening carefully to each voice. When she reached Lena, she stopped. "Sing," she commanded. Lena opened her mouth, but what came out was barely a whisper. Her voice cracked on the high note. Her throat felt tight, like something was blocking it. Mrs. Whitmore sighed loudly. It was the kind of sigh that made everyone in the room turn and look. "I see," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "Perhaps the guidance counselor made a mistake putting you in advanced choir. This class is for students who can actually sing." A few students snickered. Lena felt her face burn with shame. She wanted to explain. She wanted to tell Mrs. Whitmore that she used to be good, that she used to be one of the best. But the words would not come. Mrs. Whitmore moved on without another glance, and Lena spent the rest of the rehearsal trying not to cry. That night, she lay in the tiny bedroom of her aunt's guest house and stared at the ceiling. The room was so small that her bed touched 3 walls. Her belongings were still in boxes because there was nowhere to put them. She could hear her parents talking in the next room. Her mother was crying softly. Her father was trying to comfort her, but his voice sounded broken too. Lena thought about her old life. She thought about the stage at her old school, the way the spotlight felt warm on her skin, the way the audience would go silent when she started to sing. She thought about her old choir director, a kind man named Mr. Patterson who always believed in her. "Your voice is a gift," he used to tell her. "It is not just about hitting the right notes. It is about telling the truth. When you sing, you share your soul with the world. But what if your soul was broken? What if you had nothing left to share?" Lena turned on her side and pulled her blanket over her head. She had not sung properly in months. Every time she tried, her voice came out weak and thin. The power that used to flow through her so naturally had disappeared. It was like a part of her had died along with her old life. She did not know how she was going to survive this new school. She did not know how she was going to face Mrs. Whitmore every day. She did not know anything anymore. All she knew was that she had never felt so alone. In the darkness of that tiny room, Lena made a decision. She would stay invisible. She would sit in the back row and keep her mouth shut. She would get through this year without drawing any attention to herself. And when it was over, maybe things would be different. But life has a funny way of not going according to plan. And Lena had no idea that the hardest part was still waiting for her, just around the corner. 3 weeks passed, and Lena settled into a routine of survival. She woke up early, went to school, kept her head down, and came home. She spoke only when spoken to. She ate lunch alone in a quiet corner of the library. She became a ghost, floating through the halls without leaving any trace. In choir class, she did exactly what she had planned. She stood in the back row. She mouthed the words instead of actually singing. She avoided eye contact with Mrs. Whitmore at all costs, and for a while, it seemed to work. The teacher barely noticed her, which was exactly what Lena wanted. But Mrs. Whitmore noticed more than people realized. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. The choir room was buzzing with energy because Mrs. Whitmore had called a special meeting. She stood at the front of the room with a look on her face that made everyone sit up straighter. "As you all know," she began, her voice filling the room, "the spring showcase is in 6 weeks. This is the most important performance of the year. Parents will be there. School board members will be there. And most importantly, college scouts will be there." The students exchanged excited glances. The spring showcase was legendary at Lincoln High. It was the event that could make or break a singer's future. Students who performed well had gone on to receive music scholarships. Some had even been scouted by talent agencies. Mrs. Whitmore continued, "This year, I have decided to do something different. Instead of selecting soloists myself, I will be holding auditions. Every single student in this class will audition for a chance to perform a solo at the showcase." A murmur rippled through the room. Some students looked thrilled. Others looked terrified. Lena felt her stomach drop to the floor. "No exceptions," Mrs. Whitmore added, her eyes scanning the room. "Every student will stand in front of this class and sing. Those who are not willing to put themselves out there do not deserve a place in this choir." Lena's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She had to audition. In front of everyone. The thought made her want to run out of the room and never come back. After the meeting ended, Students gathered in small groups to talk about the auditions. Some were already discussing what songs they would choose. Others were nervous but excited. Lena packed her bag as quickly as she could, hoping to slip out unnoticed. But before she could reach the door, a voice stopped her. "Lena." A word. She turned around slowly. Mrs. Whitmore was standing by the piano, her arms crossed over her chest. The other students were filing out, but a few lingered near the door, curious about what was happening. Lena walked over, her legs feeling like they were made of stone. "I noticed you have been hiding in the back row," Mrs. Whitmore said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried across the room. The students near the door stopped to listen. "You barely open your mouth during rehearsals. You contribute nothing to this choir." Lena felt her face getting hot. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am still getting used to things." "Getting used to things?" Mrs. Whitmore raised an eyebrow. "This is advanced choir, not a therapy session. Either you belong here or you do not." Lena did not know what to say. She just stood there, feeling smaller and smaller with each passing second. "Since you seem to think the rules do not apply to you," Mrs. Whitmore continued, her voice getting louder, "I have decided that you will be the first to audition. Next Monday. In front of the entire class." The words hit Lena like a truck. First. She would have to go first. "But she started. "No excuses." Mrs. Whitmore cut her off. "If you cannot handle an audition, then perhaps you should drop this class and find something more suited to your abilities. Or lack thereof." A few students near the door snickered. Lena could feel their eyes on her, watching her humiliation like it was entertainment. "That will be all," Mrs. Whitmore said, turning away. "I expect you to be prepared." Lena walked out of that room in a daze. She did not remember the walk to her locker. She did not remember getting her things. She only remembered the feeling of her chest being so tight that she could barely breathe. That night, she sat on the floor of her tiny bedroom with her back against the bed. Her eyes were red from crying, but she had no tears left. She just felt empty. Hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside her and left nothing but a shell. Her mother knocked on the door and came in without waiting for an answer. She took one look at Lena and sat down beside her on the floor. "What happened?" her mother asked gently. Lena told her everything. The audition. Mrs. Whitmore. The way she had been called out in front of everyone. The way those students had laughed. Her mother listened without interrupting. When Lena was finished, they sat in silence for a long moment. "Do you remember when you were 7 years old?" her mother finally said. "You were in that school talent show. You were so nervous that you cried the whole morning. You said you could not do it. You begged me to let you stay home." Lena remembered. It felt like a lifetime ago. "But you went anyway," her mother continued. "And when you got on that stage, something changed. You opened your mouth and this beautiful sound came out. Everyone in that audience was amazed. Including me." "That was different," Lena said quietly. "I was different back then." Her mother took her hand. "You are still that same girl, Mija. The one who could make a whole room go silent just by singing one note. That girl did not disappear. She is just scared right now. And that is okay. Being scared does not mean you are weak. It means you are human." Lena looked at her mother. There were dark circles under her eyes from working too many hours. Her hands were rough from cleaning and scrubbing, but her face was full of love. "I do not know if I can do it," Lena admitted. "My voice does not work like it used to." "Then maybe it is time to find it again," her mother said. "Not for that teacher, not for those students, for yourself." After her mother left, Lena sat alone in the darkness for a long time. She thought about everything she had lost. Her home, her friends, her confidence, her voice. Then she thought about what her mother had said. That girl is still in there. Slowly, Lena got up and went to the closet. She dug through one of the unpacked boxes until she found what she was looking for. A folder full of sheet music from her old school. Songs she used to sing when she felt like she could fly. She pulled out one song in particular. It was a ballad about strength and hope and rising up when the world tries to push you down. She had sung it at her last competition before everything fell apart. It had earned her a standing ovation. Lena looked at the notes on the page. Her hands were trembling. She did not know if she could do this. She did not know if her voice would come back. She did not know anything anymore. But for the first time in months, she wanted to try. She opened her mouth and began to hum softly. It was barely a whisper, but it was something. And sometimes, something is all you need to start. Lena had 5 days to prepare for the audition. 5 days to find a voice that had been missing for months. 5 days to prove that she was more than the quiet girl in the back row. She started practicing that same night. After her parents went to sleep, she sat on the floor of the bathroom with the door locked. It was the only place in the tiny guest house where she could make noise without waking anyone. The tiles were cold against her legs, and the fluorescent light buzzed overhead. But none of that mattered. She looked at the sheet music in her hands and took a deep breath. Then she opened her mouth and tried to sing. What came out was awful. Her voice cracked on the first note. It wobbled on the second. By the third line, she had to stop because her throat felt like it was closing up. She sounded nothing like she used to. She sounded like a stranger. Lena put her head in her hands and sat there in the silence. Part of her wanted to give up right then. Part of her wanted to walk into school the next day and tell Mrs. Whitmore that she quit. It would be easier that way. Less painful. But then she remembered her mother's words. That girl is still in there. So she tried again, and again, and again. The first night, she practiced for 2 hours and cried 3 times. The second night was a little better. Her voice still cracked, but there were moments when it did not. Small moments when the sound that came out actually sounded like music. By the third night, something started to shift. Lena was singing in the bathroom as usual when she hit a note that surprised her. It was full and strong, and came from somewhere deep inside her chest. It only lasted a second, but it was enough. It was proof that the voice was still there, buried under all the fear and pain. She chased that feeling for the rest of the night. At school, things were harder. Mrs. Whitmore seemed to take every opportunity to remind Lena of the upcoming audition. During warm-ups, she would look directly at Lena and say things like, "I hope everyone is taking this seriously. First impressions matter." During rehearsals, she would stop the choir and announce, "Remember, the auditions will show me who truly belongs in this room and who does not." Every word felt like it was aimed at Lena. And maybe it was. The other students had started to notice too. Some of them whispered when Lena walked by. A few of them laughed. One girl in the front row, a tall blonde who always got the solos, looked at Lena with something like pity in her eyes. That was almost worse than the laughing. But there was one person who did not laugh or whisper or look at her with pity. His name was David, and he played piano for the choir. He was a senior with messy dark hair and glasses that were always slightly crooked. He never said much during rehearsals, just sat at the piano and played whatever Mrs. Whitmore told him to play. On the 4th day before the audition, Lena stayed after class to look at the piano. She did not know why. Maybe she just wanted to touch something that made music. She thought everyone had left. So she sat down on the bench and let her fingers rest on the keys. "Do you play?" Lena jumped and turned around. David was standing in the doorway with his backpack over one shoulder. "Sorry," he said quickly. "I did not mean to scare you. It is okay." Lena stood up from the bench. "I was just looking. I should go." "You do not have to." David walked over and sat down on the other end of the bench. "I heard Mrs. Whitmore is making you audition first." Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. "She did the same thing to me freshman year," David said. "I had just transferred here, and she thought I could not play. So she made me perform in front of everyone on my second day." Lena looked at him. "What happened?" David smiled a little. "I was so nervous I thought I was going to pass out. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely find the keys. But then I started playing, and something took over. The music just came out. And Mrs. Whitmore? She did not say anything for a long time. Then she told me I would be the choir's pianist from now on." David shrugged. "She is tough. Sometimes too tough. But I think she pushes people because she knows what they are capable of, even when they do not know it themselves." Lena thought about that. She was not sure she believed it. Mrs. Whitmore did not seem like she cared about anyone's potential. She seemed like she just wanted to make people feel small. "What song are you singing for the audition?" David asked. Lena hesitated. Then she told him the name of the ballad she had been practicing. David's eyes widened. "That is a hard song. Really emotional." "I know." Lena looked down at her hands. "I used to sing it at my old school. Before everything changed." David was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Would you like to practice with accompaniment? I could play for you." Lena felt her heart speed up. The thought of singing in front of anyone, even just David, made her want to run away. But she also knew that she could not keep practicing alone in the bathroom forever. At some point, she had to sing for someone. "Okay," she said quietly. "But please do not laugh if I sound terrible." "I would never laugh," David said seriously. "Music is not about being perfect, it is about being real." End quote. They practiced together for an hour that afternoon. At first, Lena's voice was shaky and thin, but David kept playing, steady and patient, never stopping, even when she made mistakes. Slowly, she started to relax. The notes came easier. The words started to mean something again. By the end, she was not just singing, she was feeling. "That was really good," David said when they finished. "You have something special." I could hear it. Lena did not know what to say. It had been so long since anyone had told her she was good at anything. That night, she practiced in the bathroom again. But this time, something was different. She was not just going through the motions. She was connecting to the song in a way she had not done in months. She thought about her father losing his job. She thought about her mother working double shifts. She thought about leaving everything behind and starting over in a place where no one knew her name, and she sang about all of it. She poured every ounce of pain and hope and fear into that song until her voice filled the tiny bathroom and echoed off the tiles. When she finished, she was crying. But they were not sad tears. They were the kind of tears that come when you finally let go of something you have been holding on to for too long. The night before the audition, Lena stood in front of the bathroom mirror. She looked at herself for a long time. She saw a girl with tired eyes and messy hair, a girl who had been through more in the past few months than most people go through in years. But she also saw something else. A spark. Small but bright. Still burning after everything that had tried to put it out. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. "You belong. You always have." She did not know if she believed it completely, but she wanted to. And for now, that was enough. Tomorrow, she would stand in front of Mrs. Whitmore and the entire class. Tomorrow, she would open her mouth and sing, and whatever happened after that, at least she would know that she tried. Lena woke up on the morning of the audition before her alarm went off. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mrs. Whitmore's face. She saw the other students staring at her. She saw herself standing in front of everyone with no sound coming out of her mouth. She lay in bed for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling. Her stomach felt like it was full of rocks. Her hands were already sweating even though she had not gotten up yet. "You can do this," she told herself. But the words felt hollow. She got dressed slowly, choosing a simple blue top that her mother said brought out her eyes. She looked at herself in the mirror and tried to smile. It came out looking more like a grimace. At breakfast, her mother made her favorite pancakes. But Lena could only manage a few bites. Her father noticed and put his hand on her shoulder. "No matter what happens today," he said, "we are proud of you. Just for trying." Lena nodded, but she could not speak. If she opened her mouth, she was afraid she might cry. The walk to school felt longer than usual. Every step brought her closer to the moment she had been dreading all week. She thought about turning around. She thought about pretending to be sick. She thought about 100 different ways to escape, but she kept walking. When she got to school, the hallways seemed louder than normal. Everyone was talking and laughing like it was just another ordinary day. And for them, it was. They had no idea that for Lena, this day could change everything. The morning classes passed in a blur. Lena sat at her desk and stared at her textbooks, but nothing made sense. The words swam in front of her eyes. All she could think about was sixth period. Choir class, the audition. When the lunch bell rang, she went to her usual spot in the library. But she could not eat. She just sat there with her sandwich untouched, watching the clock on the wall tick closer and closer to the moment of truth. At one point, David found her. He sat down across from her without saying anything at first. Then he pulled out a small piece of paper and slid it across the table. Lena looked at it. It was a quote, written in messy handwriting. It said, "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is singing anyway." Quote. She looked up at David. He gave her a small smile. "You have got this," he said. "I will be right there at the piano. Just focus on the music and forget everything else." Lena tucked the paper into her pocket. "Thank you," she whispered. David nodded and left without another word. But that small gesture meant more to Lena than he would ever know. The final bell before sixth period rang, and Lena felt her heart nearly stop. This was it. There was no more time to prepare. No more time to practice. She had to face this now. She walked into the choir room and immediately felt everyone's eyes on her. The other students were already seated on the risers. Mrs. Whitmore stood at the front of the room with her clipboard in hand. Her expression was unreadable. "Ah, there she is," Mrs. Whitmore said as Lena entered. "Our first audition. Please come to the front." Lena's legs felt like they might give out at any moment. But she forced herself to walk to the center of the room. She could hear whispers behind her. Someone giggled. She tried to block it all out. David was already at the piano. He caught her eye and gave her a tiny nod. It helped. A little. Mrs. Whitmore looked at Lena with raised eyebrows. "Whenever you are ready. We do not have all day." Lena turned to face the class. 30 faces stared back at her. Some looked curious. Some looked bored. A few looked like they were waiting for her to fail. She took a deep breath. Her hands were trembling at her sides. Her mouth felt completely dry. For a horrible moment, she thought she could not do it. The fear was too big. It was swallowing her whole. She was going to stand here in silence and prove everyone right. She was going to be exactly what Mrs. Whitmore expected her to be. A disappointment. A nobody. But then she thought about her mother working double shifts just to keep food on the table. She thought about her father, who had not smiled properly in months. She thought about everything her family had sacrificed to give her a chance. And she thought about the girl she used to be. The one who could walk onto any stage and own it. The one who was not afraid to let people hear her voice. That girl was still in there. She had to be. Lena closed her eyes. She nodded to David. The first notes of the piano filled the room. They were soft and gentle, like a hand reaching out in the darkness. Lena opened her mouth and began to sing. The first note came out shaky. She could feel everyone watching, judging. But she did not stop. She pushed through the fear and kept going. By the second line, something started to change. Her voice grew stronger. The wobble disappeared. The notes started to flow out of her like water breaking through a dam. She thought about the pain of the past few months. She thought about losing her home, her friends, her entire life. She thought about all the nights she had cried herself to sleep, wondering if things would ever get better. And she sang about all of it. Her voice filled the choir room in a way it had never been filled before. It was rich and powerful and full of emotion. Every word carried the weight of everything she had been through. Every note told a story of loss and hope and the courage to keep going. The students on the risers stopped whispering. The ones who had been looking bored sat up straighter. The girl in the front row, who always got the solos, had her mouth hanging open. Lena did not notice any of it. She was lost in the music. She was somewhere far away, in a place where nothing existed except the song and the feeling behind it. She hit the high note in the bridge, and it soared through the air like a bird taking flight. It was pure and clear and absolutely breathtaking. A girl in the second row started crying. A boy near the window wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. When Lena reached the final verse, she opened her eyes and looked directly at Mrs. Whitmore for the first time. The teacher was standing completely still. Her clipboard hung loosely at her side. Her face showed something Lena had never seen before. She looked stunned. Lena sang the last line with everything she had left. She poured every piece of her broken heart into those final words. And when the last note faded away, she stood there in the silence, breathing hard, feeling like she had just run a marathon. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The room was completely still. Then someone started clapping. It was David, at the piano. Then someone on the risers joined in. Then another person. And another. Within seconds, the entire room erupted in applause. Students jumped to their feet. They were cheering and whistling and shouting her name. A few of them rushed forward to hug her, people who had never even spoken to her before. Lena stood in the middle of it all, completely overwhelmed. Tears were streaming down her face, but for the first time in months, they were happy tears. She looked over at Mrs. Whitmore. The teacher had not moved. She was still standing in the same spot, staring at Lena like she was seeing her for the very first time. Their eyes met for just a second, and in that second, something passed between them. Lena did not know exactly what it was, but she knew that things would never be the same. She had found her voice again, and now, everyone knew it. The rest of that day felt like a dream. Everywhere Lena went, people smiled at her. Students she had never spoken to stopped her in the hallway to tell her how amazing she was. A group of girls from the choir invited her to sit with them at lunch the next day. For the first time since arriving at Lincoln High, Lena felt like she actually existed. But the one person who had not said anything was Mrs. Whitmore. After the audition, the teacher had simply moved on to the next student without a single word about Lena's performance. No praise, no criticism, nothing. She just acted like nothing unusual had happened, even though everyone in that room knew that something extraordinary had taken place. Lena did not know what to make of it. Part of her was relieved that Mrs. Whitmore had not found something to criticize, but another part of her wanted some kind of acknowledgement. Even just a nod. Something. 2 days later, the results of the auditions were posted on the choir room door. Lena almost did not want to look. She stood at the back of the crowd while other students pushed forward to see the list. Then she heard someone say her name. Lena got the solo, a voice said. The main solo. The closing number. Lena's heart stopped. She pushed through the crowd until she could see the list for herself. And there it was. Her name. Right at the top. Next to the words, Showcase. Closing solo. She stared at it for a long time, making sure it was real. Making sure she was not imagining things. It was real. That afternoon, Mrs. Whitmore asked Lena to stay after class. The other students filed out, giving Lena curious looks as they left. Soon it was just the two of them in the empty choir room. Mrs. Whitmore stood by the piano, her back to Lena. She did not say anything for a long moment. The silence stretched out until it became uncomfortable. Finally, she turned around. Her face looked different than usual. Softer somehow. Older. I owe you an apology, she said. Lena blinked. Those were the last words she had expected to hear. When you first came to my class, Mrs. Whitmore continued, I made assumptions about you. I saw a quiet girl who would not participate, and I decided you did not belong here. I tried to make an example of you. I wanted to push you out. She paused and took a breath. I was wrong. I have been teaching for over 20 years, and I have heard a lot of voices. But what you did in that audition was something special. You did not just sing a song. You made everyone in that room feel something. That is a gift that cannot be taught. Lena did not know what to say. Her throat felt tight. I am not good at admitting when I am wrong, Mrs. Whitmore said quietly. But I am telling you now. I misjudged you, and I am sorry. It was not a long apology. It was not dramatic or emotional, but it was real. Lena could see it in the teacher's eyes. She meant every word. Thank you, Lena said softly. That means a lot. Mrs. Whitmore nodded once. Then her expression shifted back to something more businesslike. Now, we have a lot of work to do before the showcase. I expect you in this room every day after school for extra rehearsals. We are going to make sure your performance is perfect. And just like that, things changed between them. Not completely. Mrs. Whitmore was still tough. She still demanded excellence. She still pushed Lena harder than anyone else in the choir. But there was a respect there now that had not existed before. A recognition that Lena had earned her place. The weeks leading up to the spring showcase were intense. Lena practiced until her voice was hoarse. She worked with David on the piano accompaniment until they could perform the song with their eyes closed. She spent hours in front of the mirror, working on her stage presence, her breathing, her emotional delivery. But she was not alone anymore. The other choir members rallied around her. They gave her tips and encouragement. They helped her with her costume for the big night. For the first time, Lena felt like she was part of something, like she belonged. The night of the showcase arrived faster than Lena expected. The school auditorium was packed with hundreds of people. Parents filled the seats. School board members sat in the front row, and scattered throughout the audience were college scouts with clipboards, watching and taking notes. Backstage, Lena peeked through the curtain and felt her stomach flip. This was the biggest audience she had ever performed for. Bigger than anything at her old school. Bigger than she had ever imagined. Nervous? David asked, appearing beside her. Terrified, Lena admitted. David smiled. Good. That means you care. Just remember what you did in that audition. Sing from your heart. The rest will take care of itself. The showcase began, and one by one, the choir performed their numbers. They sounded incredible. All those weeks of hard work had paid off. The audience clapped and cheered after each song. Then it was time for the closing number, Lena's solo. She walked onto the stage and felt the heat of the spotlight on her face. The audience went quiet. Hundreds of eyes stared up at her from the darkness. For just a second, the fear came rushing back. All the old doubts. All the old insecurities. What if she failed? What if her voice cracked? What if she let everyone down? But then she looked into the audience and saw her parents sitting in the third row. Her mother was already crying. Her father was holding her hand, looking up at Lena with so much pride that it made her heart ache. They had sacrificed everything for her. They had moved across the country. They had started over with nothing. And through it all, they had never stopped believing in her. Lena took a deep breath. She nodded to David at the piano, and she began to sing. From the very first note, she knew this performance was different. Her voice was stronger than it had ever been. It filled the auditorium and reached into every corner. It wrapped around the audience like a warm embrace. She sang about struggle and hope, about falling down and getting back up, about finding your voice when the world tries to silence you. And as she sang, she felt the weight of the past few months lifting off her shoulders. By the time she reached the final chorus, half the audience was in tears. People were holding on to each other. Some had their eyes closed, just listening, letting the music wash over them. When the last note faded away, there was a moment of complete silence. Then, the audience exploded. People jumped to their feet, clapping and cheering. The standing ovation lasted for almost 2 minutes. Lena stood on that stage with tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the love and support pouring toward her. After the showcase, a woman in a professional suit approached Lena backstage. She introduced herself as a representative from a music college 3 states away. She handed Lena her card and told her about their scholarship program for talented young singers. "We would love to have you audition," she said. "Based on what I saw tonight, I think you have a very bright future." Lena took the card with trembling hands. A scholarship. A future in music. Things she had stopped dreaming about months ago, but the moment that meant the most came a few days later. Lena was walking through the hallway when a freshman girl stopped her. She was small and shy, with braces and a nervous expression. "I was at the showcase," the girl said quietly. "I am in the beginner choir, and I was thinking about quitting." I did not think I was good enough." She paused and looked at Lena with wide eyes. "But then I heard you sing, and I decided to stay. I want to be like you someday." Lena felt her heart swell. She remembered being that girl. Scared. Doubting herself. Wondering if she had anything worth sharing. "You are already good enough," Lena told her. "Never let anyone make you believe otherwise." Years later, when people asked Lena about the moment that changed her life, she always told them the same thing. "Someone tried to make me small. They wanted to use me as an example of what failure looks like. But instead of shrinking, I remembered who I was. I found my voice again, and I sang." She would smile then, thinking about how far she had come. Sometimes the people who try to break you end up showing you just how strong you really are.